how do you propose that people approach designing that first AI experiment?
The single biggest mistake that people do in motion or like an experiment like this is like you delegate this entirely to leadership or RevOps. Leadership in general, by definition, don't know exactly what's going on in the field. That's just the truth.
Where do you draw the line on what you'll have AI handle versus what stays human?
The line for me is this something that requires human judgment at a scale where it impacts my bottom line and or talent development? If the answer is yes to any of those questions, I'm not going to automate it. You should never experiment with your foundations unless you have a replacement for that foundation.
Welcome to Go-to-Market Science. In this podcast, we share tangible, actionable playbooks from the trenches, working as go-to-market strategy and RevOps consultants for our clients here at Union Square Consulting, and candid conversations with revenue leaders in the market that have been there. Now let's get into it.
Today on the CRO Stories segment, I'm sitting down with Emir Atli, co-founder and CRO at HockeyStack. Emir started his first product at 18 from his parents' living room in Turkey, went through Y Combinator, and has scaled HockeyStack to over 300 enterprise customers in under 2 years, including a $50 million funding raise just last month as of this recording. He runs both sales and marketing, taught a class on attribution at Stanford, and his company's entire thesis is that you can't layer AI onto a broken go-to-market motion. Today, we're talking about how HockeyStack built their go-to-market engine specifically around the outbound motion to facilitate this rapid growth. So thank you so much for joining me today, Emir.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I've been following HockeyStack for a while now on LinkedIn, and I just love your guys' content that you put out. The videos are hilarious.
Thank you.
So, Emir, you helped multiply HockeyStack's revenue by about 4.5 times in a single year, and closed enterprise logos like Outreach and RingCentral, companies that have massive go-to-market organizations of their own. Before we get into the AI portion, walk me through what the go-to-market engine actually looked like that made that possible.
We have an outbound motion. We have an SDR team. We have a inbound motion that includes like social, field marketing. We are very heavy on content as like the main source of inbound pipeline. Together with like the inbound motion, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So I built 43,000, I believe now, followers on LinkedIn on my profile over the last 18 months. And then we have an expansion motion as well from our existing customers. So that's like the go-to-market motion that we run right now. The top two channels that we have in terms of sourcing net new pipeline that close the fastest at the highest ACV are social and outbound.
So what did the motion look like when you first came in? Did this structured before? Did you have to build this all from scratch?
Yeah. So as I'm a founder, there was nothing before me, but like there were stages of or like phases of the build out of our go-to-market. So it first started as 100% inbound for like about a year. So from our funding to post Series A, it was 100% inbound. Then a couple months after our Series A, we actually started to build our outbound motion. So the first phase was literally my LinkedIn, I had a small following, and then supporting that LinkedIn followers that I was, or like following that I was building with paid media. And then referrals and word of mouth was like our growth from 0 to post Series A. And then post Series A, we started building the SDR function. So the first was we hired 2 SDRs and an SDR leader. And then at the time, I think if I had to do it again, I would do it the same way, like starting with inbound and adding outbound, because when you do that, and then when you bring in an outbound function, then you have a lot of inbound demand that you're not able to serve, which is like the first like experiment of outbound. So for example, for like a year, we had a lot of traffic, a lot of followers, comments, likes, engagement. We have an interactive demo on our website, so like thousands of people checked it out. We never reached out to them because we didn't have an SDR function. I didn't have enough time to do it on my own. So there's like a lot of that demand that outbound can cater to as like the first like 3 to 6 months motion. So we did that. So the first 3 months was essentially like, how do we reach out to those people in the shortest amount of time possible, and then test our messaging because it's the first time that you actually, or like the prospect actually talks to someone before the first demo. So the first 3 months was just like what type of script works well. And then we found out that cold calls or like calling people instead of like email or LinkedIn was the most important or like the best channel for outbound for HockeyStack specifically. So once we figured it out, then everything was about how can we call the highest number of people in the shortest amount of time possible with the best script, and how can we hire people and train them in a very short amount of time to get them on the phones. So then after the first 3 months, then we turned the inbound to outbound motion into more like a system that requires maybe like 20% of our time. Then post the first quarter, then it was all about, again, like how can we call as many people as possible in the shortest amount of time possible with the script. And then we scale it from there. The first team of like 3 became 5, 8, 9, and then some of them graduated into our AE team and account management teams. And then right now, like 50 to 75% of their time is spent on calling to support our sales functions. Yeah, and then after that, then SDR team was in a good place. We of course, like we continue to improve it, and then we can talk about how we improved it and how we turned into a system. Then we start opening up new channels and new experiments all the time, which contributed a lot to our growth. So like right after we figured out the outbound motion, then we opened up field marketing, then we opened up other ad channels, then we opened up internal influencers. Yeah, we just scale from there afterwards.
Mm-hmm. So you went into building the outbound motion knowing that you wanted to create this massive scale and likely with AI. So how did you build those foundations to make sure that AI could actually give you the ROI that you're looking for from it?
Yeah. So that was like when we started the outbound function, it was the first time that I actually personally interacted with an SDR team. So we hired an SDR leader, and then we hired one SDR first after like a couple of weeks because we didn't want to hire an SDR, but he was an incredible profile, and he actually reached out to us. Devin, who is still here as an AE in our AE team, was our first SDR, so we had to hire him, even though it was the wrong time, but he exceeded all of our expectations. So the first thing was like when we hired this team, again, it was the first time that I interacted with an SDR team. One of the things that was really surprising to me was like 80% of the time was spent between ZoomInfo, CRM, and outreach, like clicking on buttons, which again, now that I think about it, or like if you have been interacting with SDR teams, it's not that surprising, but like as a first principles thinker, it was like very difficult for me to understand why this is happening. Then I brought up this idea of like, why are we spending this time? Like what can we do about this? And this was like end of 2024. So before all this cloud code and everything era right now that we're going through. So first, like no one believed that this couldn't be automated. Again, this was before this era of everything is automated, so end of 2024. Then I started working on it myself with 2 other people on my team to essentially like understanding what is this process, what does this process look like right now. So essentially the process is you build an account list for every SDR with your RevOps team, or they do it themselves. Then they click on a bunch of buttons to get emails and everything from ZoomInfo. They export it to CRM. From CRM, they expand it to outreach. From outreach, they write sequences and then they send those sequences. If you have a dialer, those contacts also go into a dialer. So when you think about it, even back then, this was like, I believe that this was a highly automatable process. Like you can make this automated. So we built the version 1 on Clay and cut like a bunch of CSVs essentially. So we picked an SDR from our team as like the experiment. So we watched this person doing this work. We documented everything. And then I had one person who turned this into a Clay table. And then from that table, we experimented with it. The first couple of weeks was like very rough because there is a lot of work that an SDR, like an AE, needs to do on the background that I didn't notice, where like, especially in the go-to-market, there's a lot of different titles. Like, for example, you need to know if a senior manager of RevOps, like if you need to reach out to a senior manager of RevOps or VP of RevOps or manager of sales ops, like differences between titles is very important, and that is only something that you can gather by work at a company for a long enough time, or it needs to be highly documented, which back then we didn't have it documented. So there was or like, for example, another great example for this is like there's a difference between our VP of sales or our VP of North America sales. So like if it's an RVP of sales, it depends on the company, but like an RVP of sales might mean that they have the entire like worldwide RVP sales, like or like RVP of North America sales is more senior than RVP of West sales. So you need to build a lot of those. So the version 1 was like literally hundreds of prompts that like filtered those titles and made it possible for us to get to a version 1. Then we bought a dialer, and then from there it was like week over week we created a Slack channel where like people would put in the wrong titles, wrong people, problems that they're having. And at some point we outgrew Clay. It was great for like 1 or 2 people, but afterwards it became incredibly painful and incredibly time consuming and very expensive. So we hired an engineer like working on the growth side of our business to take this and then turn it into more like a API led process that we stored in MongoDB ourselves. And then from there we essentially turn into a pipeline of huge amount of data because all of these APIs are public. So we essentially get all of the data that we need from different APIs, and we have our own custom prompts and filtering that filters everything, storing in MongoDB, and then we pipe that into Outreach and Nooks, who are like Outreach we use for sales engagement and Nooks we use for dialing, and then everything falls back into our CRM.
Okay. I'm assuming you're like segmenting these, you mentioned knowing the differences between specific job titles. So you're segmenting between these specific job titles so that you're able to get the right information on them to create the right scripts and prompts for your sales team so they don't have to do like hours and hours of research before they even pick up the phone.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I was very fortunate enough to hire great people who ran this idea that I had. And it was like a very simple idea. I just thought like this shouldn't be the case in 2024 that we spend all this time. And our head of sales and plus our engineer who was working on it did an incredible job. Yeah, in the simplest form, it is finding like essentially you have a TEM list that usually companies don't update at all. So we built a system that we actually update our TEM every month, because if you have a TEM or serviceable market, then it is very obvious that new companies enter that TEM or exit that TEM. For example, if you are targeting 100 to 3,000 employee companies, there are companies who grow from 80 to 100 over the last 3 months, so you need to add those. Whereas there are certain companies that downsize, for example, that you need to exclude from that list. So we continue to update our TEM, then we continue to find the people that we need to reach out to, and then we pipe all of that data into our tools for engagement. Yeah, that's like the foundation of it.
Mm-hmm. And did you guys include intent-based signals into the things that you API for in order to, let's say, like stack rank the accounts that you're calling on?
Yeah, so this is like the full-on cold outbound motion, and then we run more like a warm outbound motion. So the warm outbound motion that we have is run on HockeyStack. So we have prospecting agents that does that portion very well. So essentially, like they surface anything from third-party signals to first-party signals to people that we know, and multi-threading all of those. It's more like targeted, so it lives in HockeyStack. And then we have the cold outbound motion that's custom built, because that's something that I think you need to build internally.
That's cool. So how do you use your own product to do this? Walk me through the parts of your product that you guys are actually using to help your own outbound motion.
So we have prospecting agents and deal agents. Prospecting agents are to prospect and deal agents are to run deals. Our prospecting agents are essentially, we have one agent per account, and that agent's entire job is to break into the account. So all of our SDRs have a tab in the HockeyStack or Salesforce where essentially it shows the accounts they didn't target, the tasks that are specific to those accounts, and then they need to go into those tasks and execute or change the task and execute them. So what it looks like in practice is we have, again, because we have been in the market for some time now, we have a lot of data on usage, prior relationships, intrapaths, third-party data, first-party data. So anything from like this person bought from us twice, and then now they're another ICP account, and they have posted about the AI transformation, to this account has been using HockeyStack pretty extensively. But we have been talking to their RevOps team, not their sales team. So there's an expansion opportunity there. To third-party signals, like anything from their LinkedIn posts to hiring and everything in between, are surfaced to our SDR team automatically.
And so you guys built this outbound motion, alongside AI. It wasn't like you had an outbound motion for years and years, and then you tacked on, AI tools to help it. What's your take on people who are already running companies that have like these legacy outbound motions, and now they're trying to incorporate AI into existing outbound motions?
Probably get like a team. It depends on your company size or like your team size. Let's say you have 100 reps. For this to be statistically significant, you probably want like 10 people. I would get those 10 people, build a version 1 first before getting those 10 people. Build a version 1 of what you want to do, get those 10 people, tell them they will be guaranteed to hit 100% for a quarter. The only thing that they need to do is prove or disprove that this motion works. It would probably take less than 3 months. So if you want, you can also do 1 month of quarter relief. And then I would want that team of 10 people to be from diverse backgrounds. Like I wouldn't pick like all top performers, because then you don't really know if they're top performers, and that's why it works. So pick like different backgrounds, different quota profiles or attainment profiles, and then put them in a team, power their entire motion with the thing that you're building for outbound. And then in a month or so, if you move fast enough, you would see results, or you don't see results. But I'm like 100% sure that if you do it right, or if you don't do it right, if you move quickly, or move fast enough, then you will see great results. Then once it's proved on those 10 people, then I would gradually roll it out to everybody. I think it's impossible to like not change anything and then just add a system like this or AI in general to the existing system. It also applies for anything, that not just outbound, running deals, expansion, whatever you do. You just need to kill everything and then start from scratch, in my opinion, at this state of the market. Yeah, that's how I would do it.
So let's back up a second. You said tell them that you like guarantee them 100%, that they'll hit 100% of quota. How do you make that guarantee when this is an experiment?
I'm saying like something like a quota relief. Their only job is running this motion, and if they're also thinking about quota, the hard thing, like unfortunate and fortunate thing about running a sales team is optimized to hit quota in their minds. So for example, if you say there's an experiment and you run this experiment for a month, and if you don't say like you don't need to worry about quota, whenever you're not around, they will go back to the old motion, book meetings. When they're done with hitting quota, then they will test your pilot. So it needs to be fair for both parties, where like you need to guarantee something for them to be able to test this new thing, because it's very likely that in the first month it's not going to work.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So because salespeople, they got to put food on the table. So they're going to go after the thing that's going to make the money. If they're judged down by quota, of course, they're going to try and go after quota. So if their only focus needs to be running the experiment and doing as good a job as they can while following these processes, then they're going to do that. Okay, so you have these 10 people. You tell them, you don't worry about quota, like you'll be covered. Just run this process exactly how we've designed it. How do you propose that people approach designing that first AI experiment? Like what should they build when they're first wanting to integrate this into their motion?
Like the single biggest mistake that people do in motion or like an experiment like this is like you delegate this entirely to leadership or RevOps. So both of these are highly dangerous because like leadership in general, by definition don't know exactly what's going on in the field. That's just the truth. So if you say, hey, VP of sales and VP of RevOps, let's come up with what this motion needs to be like. And if they sit in a room for 30 minutes with no involvement from any IC, I guarantee you that the outcome or like the output of their project is not going to be relevant to the people in the field. Especially as a large company, you have different regions, different business units, different products, different line items, everything. And each of those teams have different problems. So there might be strong overlap between the problems or between the teams of problems and challenges they run into. Still, it's impossible to do it right without any IC involvement. So I would probably pick a RevOps leader who's good with systems, a sales leader in a pod. So for example, let's say you pick one of the customers that we implemented something similar with HockeyStack prospecting agents is this is a global company with like $600 million in revenue, with like 7 different regions and lots of different business units and product line items and sales leaders and everything. They even have different ops leaders for different teams. So we picked a region, which was EMEA, a pod of 15 people and a sales leader, a RevOps leader, and a team lead who was working very closely with, it was like an IC plus like a player coach type of station, which is very common in all sales teams. So those 3 people and us, we built something for them, built as in like deployed HockeyStack prospect agents. And then that pod became very successful. And then now every region, every unit is running on HockeyStack. Very similar to that, I would pick that team, make sure that there's a sales leader, there's an ops leader, there's a player coach who knows the field, and then build like a 30-day MVP plan. And then in building that, I would think about like what are the top 3 challenges that we are trying to solve in this new motion, and then run with that pod of people.
So what were some of the results that you saw when people did these experiments, in terms of, reply rates, pipeline generation, maybe even revenue, as much as you're able to say, when they're doing the experiment portion of it?
So essentially, like, again, it depends on the challenge that you have. But for example, for us, it was, let's say an SDR quota is 10 meetings a month, and your team is averaging 90% attainment rolling over the last 6 months. 80% of their time is spent on prospecting, and 20% gets them to nine meetings on average a month. So then in my mind, if I can cut that time on prospecting, of course we can book more than 9 meetings on average probably, but in the first 30 days, that system is going to break all the time, not going to have the right titles, right accounts. It's going to frustrate a lot of people. So it's not going to be like exactly we will go from 9 to 15 in a month. But it would make what would make me happy and satisfied in those first 30 days is, can we get to, like, for example, let's say 70% of our average attainment right now within this 30 days while not using our old systems would give me confidence that we are hitting 70% with a MVP version of it that has a lot of problems. Now I believe that if I put in more effort and more ops resources and more like involvement from other people, and if this system actually works, 70% is going to go to 150%. So it depends on, like, again, the quota attainment. Like, you cannot expect 30% quota attainment to go to 100% quota attainment in the first month with a broken system, and it's going to be broken in the first 30 days. There's no way around that. But I would like average it like 70% of prior quota attainment average rolling past 6 months in the first 30 days. And if we can hit that or come close to that, that means that the hypothesis is correct. We just need to make it better. And when you hit like parity, so your system is at parity in terms of quota attainment, then it means that it's just going to get better over time from there.
Right. And even if you're hitting parity, you're probably using less resources, I'm guessing. So less time, maybe needing less capacity. Would you say that?
Well, like, my thought process there is, I don't believe in do more with less. Like, I would prefer to do more with more all the time. So for example, if 10 of my reps are hitting quota with less time, then I can add 20, 25, 30 more, and then do even more than that.
I like that. Doing more with more.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's trying to do more with less these days, but it's not always possible. I mean, with AI, I think it is possible to a degree, but if you're able to do more with less, you just add more and then you can do exceptionally more. So let's say in the case that you're running this experiment and quota attainment isn't on par or higher than what you would expect it to be, and something is breaking down the experiment, something's not working with the way that you've implemented AI in your systems. What is the first place you look for what's broken, and how do you diagnose this and renew the experiment with fixes?
So there might be a couple of reasons why it didn't work. One, and again, if it's purely for outbound, list might be wrong, context might be wrong. There might be like an ICP mismatch, essentially. There might be a messaging problem. It might be a personnel problem, like that pod that you selected are actually low performers. So no matter what you do, maybe they're not going to get to that level. So I would like to really think about what's the mismatch between the problems that we identified and what this solution is not fixing in the original set of problems that we identified. And then from there, I would diagnose that problem that way. So it's essentially like the good thing about outbound is it's very systematic. So in its essence, like if you have the right people and if you have the right message and if you have talented individuals, you will get to an outcome. It's not rocket science. It is difficult, but it's not like for example, running an enterprise deal might have 1,000 different variables why you lose a deal versus not booking 10 meetings a month is a much simpler problem. Some like people might get upset about this, but it's essentially like this is what I believe in. So essentially I would look at those components. Do we have the right people? Do we have the right context and right accounts? Do we have the right message? And are we able to supplement enough of those to people on our team? And do we have the right team? So if all of these are right, then you should get the results. If one of these are not right, then you're not going to get to parity or to the level that you want. That's what essentially it comes up. So like, for example, from our experience, the first 30 to 60 days, it didn't work very well because of, again, like when you delegate this work to humans, you don't really get to see what's happening behind the scenes in their brains of like looking into an account and selecting people is actually a very difficult problem. And that's like a human judgment problem. And you need to essentially teach a machine how to think like your best reps to choose those people. And it makes a lot of mistakes. So it's more like I approach it as more like a broader scale and exclusion filters versus including titles. Like when you're building a list, we started more like broader and then exclusions, and then got like constant feedback from our team to exclude over and over again, multiple times a day to get to the truth.
Quick pause. Everything we talk about on this show, diagnosing go-to-market ops, prioritizing projects for revenue impact, processes, metrics, insights, building a predictable go-to-market engine, we've built frameworks for all of it. They're free and ungated on our website, unionsquareconsulting.com/frameworks. The link will also be in the show notes, so make sure you check that out. All right, back to the episode. At what point in the breakdown of an experiment, for example, do you say we need to go back to the drawing board and actually look at the foundations here? And, are we even targeting the right ICP for this segment? Are we targeting it with the right messaging? Do we have to go back to how we're divvying up territories or how we're ranking our accounts? When do you know that it's like a fundamental process problem and not just a problem with the way that you've trained the AI?
It is like overall when I run teams or like run revenue or sales teams in general is I like experiments. I think like I like to run dozens of experiments at all times, but it's very important to not change a couple core pieces of your foundation before, like, for example, let's say it depends on your revenue goals, but let's say you're targeting $10 million per quarter and you have 6 different revenue motions and you have like attainment or like progress to goal for each motion over the last 6 months. And then those are the, let's say, 4 or 5 motions that you have. And there's going to be difference in how successful they are. And if you need 5 of those at averaging like $2 million per quarter, and some of them will be 3, 4, 5, and some of them will be like 500K to $1 million, just like how mature they are in terms of revenue motions, I would never change the top 3 without adding another 3 motions that would replace them. And I will never experiment with those top 3 motions. The reason I'm saying that is because like in order to understand if the foundation is broken or like AI is broken or whatever, is comparing those top 3 motions against an AI version of those. And that is what would tell you if something is broken in AI or something else. Versus the mistake that I see with a lot of revenue functions is they just like experiment with every single motion at all times. And you never understand if it's like something that you're doing wrong, or the market is wrong, or there's like sentiment on your brand that's wrong, or buyers don't want to buy anymore, seasonality. You don't get to know it because you're experimenting with your foundations. You should never experiment with your foundations unless you have a replacement for that foundation. So that's how I approach it. Again, like for example, if you take that example of 30 days, instead of experimenting with new titles for outbound, I would experiment with what are our top three account filters and top 3 titles, and 2 scripts that we know it will work every single time. And if you don't know those, then I wouldn't bother with AI because you have a bigger problem. So yeah, that's how I would approach it.
And where do you draw the line on what you'll have AI handle versus what stays human? And has that line moved since you first drew it?
Yeah. I would say the single biggest problem in sales right now in building teams is as you do this work more and more, you lose your talent pool from the SDR team to the AE team. What I mean by that is like one thing that no sales leader that I talk to is thinking about is like we have, if you're running like the traditional SDR to AE motion, and if you're a good sales leader, you probably think about talent to open internally from SDR to AE team or SDR to account management team if they want that. And the AE motion and account management motion are highly more like dependent on human judgment and decision making and critical thinking and creativity. Like you have to be creative to close a 300K deal. I'm not saying that an SDR will close a 300K deal in their first year as an AE, but they need to get to that level eventually. An SDR, if they've been an SDR for 1.5 years at your company, and if every single thing that they're doing is automated, then they become an AE. And the AE work is not 100% automated. And it's never going to be 100% automated. So they have this like muscle that they lose. So one of the things that I changed my mind on, or like being more intentional about, is I'm drawing the line on automation, and I'm like being very intentional with my teams on like, these are the things that we need to use our brains and not automate, because otherwise I will have a team of robots that I don't want that. So for example, for the SDR team, we went from like 100% just cold calling all the time and repeating the same script over and over again, objection handling, to reducing that time and then spending 25-30% of our time every day on like, how can we break into our top 50 accounts ourselves without cold calling? Like, for example, we have SDRs. Like, for example, we have an SDR, Max, who essentially printed. We have a concept called Blueprint in our product. We essentially create the blueprint of your sales process. He printed custom blueprints for his target accounts and thought about like, what would like, let's say Rippling, what would Rippling sales process look like? He printed those out at our office, wrote custom notes, shipped it to their offices, and then like record videos and things like that. Is a simple example of like using our brain. And on the AE side, for example, multi-threading is not automated. It's not going to be automated. Certain CRM fields will never be automated. Like, for example, pain, metric, P will never be automated. So like that is something that I've been very intentional about over the last couple months, because like, again, I'm running not just a sales team, I'm also running a talent pipeline, and that talent pipeline needs to use their brains.
And why specifically pain? I mean, I think I can guess the answer, but I want to hear it in your own words.
Yeah, because the first time that we essentially like thought about, okay, we have a lot of, I don't know, a lot of like metric fields and we should automate it. Then we automated all metric fields and all qualification. Then one of the important things about that qualification that's not just like pipeline reviewers asking who's the economic buyer and what's the pain is it's impacting SQL conversion rates, SDR compensation, because like we have a bar of like SQL criteria that's impacting compensation. So if you have enough of the metric fields or qualification, whatever criteria you have, then they get paid on opportunities. And we got to a point where like we have a lot of opportunities, and you can like, if you give any transcript to AI, and if you ask them to describe pain, if you have like a better than average AE, you will get some sort of pain. Like any buyer, any persona in B2B tech has a pain. Does that pain mean that they will buy? Usually not. Is that pain really urgent? Usually not. Is that pain something that we can solve? Probably, maybe. I don't know. Like someone needs to use their brain to understand, is this pain that's something that we can solve? Are they willing to pay for that pain? Is that pain something that they want to tolerate for longer? If so, why? We need to be able to understand those. And I got to a point where like every deal, every call has pain. And when you read it, it's written very well because it's AI. And rather than like making that process perfect, like for example, if you prompt it enough and if you build a good enough system to say, okay, if you're not able to solve that, don't fill out this field, it can get better. But also it's like when you create a business case, everything prior to the business case is automated. AE needs to go in, intentionally read pain, metrics, and everything that the AI is automated. And no one does that. So they get to a business case, and I'm asking the AE, what's the pain, what's the matter, the metrics I focus on, we don't know. Or it's automated. Yeah, that's one of the like stakeholder, like multi-threading, same exact thing. Most multi-threading just sucks in enterprise sales. It's just like, hey, CMO, I'm talking to your team. FYI, no response needed. Like, I know I'm not going to respond to the email myself if someone is multi-threading to me. Why would I do that? And it's like, that's something that we need to use our brains because we need to get to power at like a 5,000 employee company. I'm not going to give AI to that. So the line for me is this something that requires human judgment at a scale where it impacts my bottom line and or talent development? If the answer is yes to any of those questions, I'm not going to automate it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Like I use AI pretty much day to day in everything that I do. And I also try to be very careful with the type of tasks that I give to AI because you don't want some of these skills to erode. Absolutely. And pain is so important to understand. Like you absolutely need to be able to use your own brain to hear what somebody's saying to you and pick apart the nuances and read between the lines of what they're saying also, to understand maybe what's underneath and not what they're just saying at face value even. And that's something that maybe AI could probably do, but so important to know on a human level because you can't just maybe one day this will happen, but hopefully not anytime soon, but you can't just sit there and have like an AI, feeding you everything to say on a sales call while you're talking to another human being. At that point, it's just, you are the robot. So you need to be able to have these human connections and conversations and be able to think with your brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you also expanded the AE role so that they own accounts end to end. So not just when the sale closes, but afterwards as well. So they stay at the account forever. That's a structural decision that I think most CROs would debate and few might actually make. What problem were you trying to solve there? And why did you believe the traditional handoff model wasn't the way to go?
Especially in our like more strategic accounts. There's a recent change that we made. So like we have 2 years minimum of accounts, like hundreds of accounts that we didn't run this motion on. So essentially my hypothesis is it's a little bit early to see results because it's been like a couple months now, but essentially like when you have a very strategic account or like anything that's not an SMB account. SMB accounts, if you're selling SMB, it doesn't really matter. And an SMB expansion should ideally be product led, not like an AE led. But mid-market, enterprise, and strat, all of those accounts, anything from 3 to 12-month sales cycles, the AE has developed a champion or a set of champions. And no matter what we do, the handoff document is not going to be perfect, and the account manager is not going to be able to get that document and then turn it into like an expansion business or an expansion mindset. And the problems that we ran into were like account managers or customer success managers are comped on retention or expansion. So on the retention side, you can also make the metric like, I don't know, net revenue retention, for example, that would be tied to expansion to a certain degree. But it's very difficult to be able to balance the retention motion and expansion motion with the one function or one team, let's say account managers or customer success managers. Because again, like people can take shortcuts. So for example, if you say net revenue retention, one account can just renew at 15% because they love the product. That would mean that you don't need to sell another company 15% more SKUs or seats or products, whatever, just because that company loves the account manager and the product and they just accept the renew at 15%. That's one. Second is, again, that context. So we have, again, hundreds of accounts where we built the strongest champions that the AE has never talked to again because they're just focused on new business. So then, like, it essentially means that we start a net new relationship building exercise with an account manager who is different than an AE with the same set of champions, and the champions need to trust his account manager again and learn about them, and the account manager learns about this person or people. And we just go through this entire exercise again when we already did it once. Together with this, I also made sales engineers full cycle too, which I believe I'm very passionate about this. So before we had sales engineers doing scoping, and then once it's closed, or like scoping and qualification and selling, like technical selling essentially, then we handed off to the implementation managers. So an implementation managers, exactly the same thing. There's a lot of context and trust that's built with the sales engineer who is perfectly capable of implementing the account as well. Or we passed off the implementation managers. So right now, the motion that we are running is sales engineers are full cycle with this help of implementation managers. So they're like owning the account success end to end. And implementation managers are helping the sales engineer implement it with their context and knowledge and everything about the account. AE is very similar. AE's job is done when we successfully expand the account. When we expand the account, we can expand them multiple times. Their job ends if, unfortunately, account churns, which can be a combination of different reasons. But the AE is essentially the CEO of the account until the account churns. We have a sales engineer on the technical side. We have an account manager who is keeping the relationship and like doing adoption and like team usage and seats. AE is the owner of the dollar value of the account in terms of new SKUs and adoption, expansion. All of those. Account manager is more like, I need to get adoption from this account. I need to sell more seats, and more like adoption focus and gross revenue retention, essentially, logos. And then sales engineer has resources like we have, similar to forward deployed engineers, we have engagement managers and we have implementation managers, and sales engineers work with those people to be able to deploy and get to success.
I actually like that model because it takes the pressure off of, a customer success manager to, be a salesperson also and try to expand and renew these accounts and learn about product white space, stakeholder white space, and everything when they have so many other things on their plate. As a CSM, which is a team that's historically under-resourced as it is, that's really cool. So if a CRO is listening to this and they're thinking about doing something similar or making similar moves, what's one thing that you'd say that they need to get right before they implement this with their own team?
Yeah, I would start from like not like change everything all at once. Again, keep the foundations right. I think I would pick like a certain segment. So for us, it was strategic, and it came at the same time as like a new product launch, which is a great opportunity to do new things. So we launch our new product module, which is revenue agents, which includes prospecting and deal agents. As we started running POCs and pilots and closing customers, it became very clear that the old model is not going to work. And then we changed it for the new motion. And now we are step by step, we are bringing that strat account model to like enterprise and mid-market at different levels and different strategies. So I would either like, if you're launching a new product, that would be the perfect time. If you're not launching a new product or a new motion, I would start with like strat or enterprise and then go from there. And SMB, you don't need it. So it's usually upper mid-market, enterprise, and strat.
We don't have a ton of time left, just coming up on the hour here. So I just wanted to get a couple more questions out. So the first one is result metrics. So you talked before about being really focused on result metrics. What are the specific metrics that you hold your revenue team to, and which ones would you say are, metrics that a lot of CROs usually put on a pedestal or think very highly of, but you don't really look at that much?
We have TVs all around our office. We work in person. So all TVs have a custom dashboard that I built with Cloud Code. So every single day, it's right next to my desk. So whenever something happens, it's like notifying everybody. So I look at meetings booked daily against daily goal, meetings booked weekly against weekly goal, S2 pipeline, so stage 2 plus pipeline is qualified pipeline, daily, weekly, monthly change. I look at fires. Fires mean accounts with more than a certain ACV that has not moved to a different stage in like more than 7 business days or 14 business days, depends on the segment. So those are like daily metrics that I look at. I'm not going to say like, I will think about what's the metric that everyone looks at that I don't look at, but I think one of the things that everyone looks at that I don't look at that often is quarterly forecast. Because I think you can only control, in my opinion, the next 2 weeks of your business, and you can control this month. If I'm starting a net new quarter, in my opinion, there is no real reason, or like there's no reality in like what's gonna close this quarter 3 months from now. So usually I ignore the quarterly forecast. I'm just focused on the next 2 weeks. What can we move right now? And then, of course, we work on like longer cycle deals and everything. And we try to close them on the close dates that we put in as goals. But like the quarterly forecast metric as like a leading indicator of success for a business, in my opinion, is misleading. Because forecasts in general, mostly guesswork. So yeah, I don't look at quarterly forecasts that often. I look at the next 2 weeks, maximum this month, and what are leading indicators of success for our quarterly forecast.
Okay. And just the last question here. If a CRO is listening to this today and they want to, increase the revenue that they're seeing from their outbound motion, increase pipeline generation, increase predictability in their forecasting, what's the first thing that you tell them to focus on?
Yeah, most companies or most CROs don't know how they close deals. So it's something that we hear all the time where like you talk to a CRO or like you talk to a VP of sales and they're like paying a consulting company millions of dollars to create their sales process. It is like there's a reality that's happening in the market right now. I think that is the right instinct, but it's the wrong move because these companies take 3 quarters, usually like 9 months. And when they build your sales process that you're running already, it's 9 months late. So the market changed. Your people like, yeah, hobby sales changed in the last 9 months. So that's going to be accurate. What I've done for myself, which I would encourage all sales leaders to do with their team, is you take the top 20, let's say 20 deals at the highest ACV, shortest time to sale. And then you create the blueprint of those deals. So you study them for like hours and hours, however long it's going to take. I did this myself. It takes a long time. But you create essentially like, how do we close deals at the maximum efficiency, and what do we do? And when you do that, when you watch those calls, when you listen to call recording, when you see how they did the multi-threading, then you come up with like an actual real process that doesn't live in your Salesforce between those 5 stages that you decided 5 years ago. You will see all the details in between. And then I would encourage everyone to turn it into an enablement and like run it every single day. That's how we built our product as well. What I call the blueprint is essentially making that automated and then running that with agents. But like the first step would be actually studying what makes like a great saying that I like, or like the something that I learned from a great sales leader is, everyone talks about like having taste, but to have taste, you need to know what good looks like, and you need to feel what good looks like. Otherwise, you don't have a developed taste. So you need to develop taste, and you need to have the team also have the same taste. And that would be the first step that I would take.
Awesome. Amazing answer. Thank you so much, Emir. And where can people find you if they'd like to follow what you're doing with HockeyStack or check out HockeyStack in general?
HockeyStack.com and my LinkedIn.
All right. And that's, we'll have a link to Emir's LinkedIn in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Emir.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the episode. If this resonated, please give us a 5-star rating and a follow. It helps us reach more people, and you get our latest and greatest content without having to search for it. And if you're looking for hands-on help in go-to-market strategy and/or RevOps, please reach out to us. We help our clients with everything from annual planning to improving processes in go-to-market, implementing systems to support those processes, and go-to-market AI. We're always happy to offer a free consultation to help you identify the best opportunities to improve your go-to-market engine with or without our help. You can find us at unionsquareconsulting.com, and the info will be in our show notes.